My story's name. There is a leak in my apartment ceiling, and I think it's hiding a portal to hell. Let's start. I hear the dripping again. The constant drip, drip, drip of water. I blink my eyes open and try to focus to make sure I'm not in another nightmare. It sounds like another leak. This one might be the last. The last time I will hear it before the horrible conclusion to this ordeal. The last time hearing that telltale noise before the true nature of that loathsome portal is revealed and whatever hideous dimension hiding on the other side breaks through completely. The sound is growing louder. Each drop has an exaggerated tone. It sounds like small explosions all trying to collapse the ceiling and engulf me in the dark abyss that I have already once been forced to endure. I just can't believe this could really be happening. It just can't. It swallowed people up, the portal behind that damn leak. I don't know what to do. Just a short while ago, my only problem would have been the water damage to my belongings. Indeed, such a mundane problem as a leak in the ceiling would just be a minor issue. Nothing to fear except the repair bill. Yet I'm afraid it is a bit beyond that now. I shouldn't have waited this long. I should have just left. Yet where could I have gone? Maybe I should have paid more attention to who I was talking to and what they were saying. All too late now, I suppose. I have been living in this apartment for close to 6 months. I had moved into this dingy complex to a small studio apartment after I lost my job and had to find a part-time position at significantly less pay. I tried to stay optimistic, but even before the terrible reality of what I was stepping into was clear, I was still in hard times. I could barely afford this decrepit room as it was, and I had no family or friends to speak of that I might be able to move in with, so my options were essentially non-existent. Considering the dire situation, I found the cheapest accommodation I could, and what I found was my home in hell for the last 6 months. Number 316 at the Greenfield Heights apartment complex. The amenities included paper-thin walls to hear all the drug deals gone wrong, domestic violence and constant sirens of emergency vehicles blaring from all sorts of incidents, topped off with a nice turn-down service of package and mail theft to boot. All of these problems, though, feel small compared to the true horror of what the place had in store for me. No, it wasn't exactly a paradise, but I had to find the cheapest place I could. I was barely making a fraction of what I was before at my old job, and I needed somewhere to get back on my feet. I told myself it was temporary, and once I could get a better job, I would get out of here. When I had first arrived to look at the place, I had arranged a simple walkthrough with the landlord, Mr. Jacobs, a very unpleasant fellow who always looked perpetually angry and was constantly shouting in the halls, and at the few miserable-looking staff who worked here. We walked up 2 flights of stairs, passing a wall of profanity-laden graffiti, tagged along almost the whole length of it, leading up to where my future home was to be. Mr. Jacobs opened the door, and the rattling handle nearly fell off in the effort. We stepped inside, and the dank room stank like a tomb. The tiny apartment was depressing, and when he went to turn on the main light, nothing happened. He scoffed and muttered a string of colorful language and grumbled that someone will bring a new light bulb. I told Rodney to check earlier, that lazy piece of shit. I didn't want to press the matter since he looked pissed off, so we went in, and he showed me what little there was to see of the tiny apartment. We had to rely on the dim light of the bedroom to see elsewhere, since the main light was out. Despite leading the walkthrough, it looked like Mr. Jacobs was distracted. He was looking at the ceiling in the corner of the tiny living room with a concerned grimace on his face. He stared at it for a while and paused the tour. I found it a little weird. He finally looked back at me as if noticing that I was watching him stare at the ceiling, and he shrugged and asserted that, "Yeah, you are going to want to get some buckets. When it rains heavily, that part of the ceiling leaks. Can't seem to find out how since there's no leak on 416 above, but bad luck on this one, I guess. That's the only reason the price is so low." He shot me a grin that I could only describe as enthusiastically malicious. After the brief walkthrough, Mr. Jacobs turned around and asked very bluntly, "You are not a troublemaker, are you?" His eyes narrowed and he looked very threatening suddenly. I assured him of my earnest intent and need for a place to stay, and he softened briefly. At least I think he did. It was hard to tell with him. He regarded me one more time and said, "Good, we don't need more troublemakers. Too many questions. Always snooping around. If you have any questions, try to figure it out yourself. This isn't the Ritz, we don't take care of everything for you. You are going to have to make do as is. Something really bad like a fire, then you can call. But for minor shit, best to just figure it out yourself. Rent's due on the 1st, by the way. No exceptions and no grace period. Anyone who bums out on their debt gets their asses kicked out next day. Fuck tenant laws." He shot me another wicked smile and returned downstairs, leaving me with the keys and just assuming I had agreed to move in. I was dumbfounded by the combination of his upfront hateful attitude and the subtext of certain things he had mentioned. What in his mind was a troublemaker? And what happened to those who asked too many questions? I couldn't believe I was going to have to live here. In a better position, I would have left immediately, but it was either here or homeless. All the other places I had looked at were too expensive, so I left and began packing my things. The whole situation was awful, but I had no choice. I moved in the next weekend. Moving day was as bleak as my mood. It had been raining on and off again all day and seemed to start heavily just in time to when I was moving my boxes, almost as if to spite me. I started taking my stuff upstairs to my new room. As I was taking the first box up the stairs, I thought I heard a gunshot. I rushed on in nervous tension, and as I was approaching my door, I heard a voice call out in a tone that was actually friendly. "Excuse me, it looks like you dropped something." I was surprised to see a woman standing in the hall with a look of friendly concern. As I looked down to see, I had indeed dropped something from the broken box I was trying to carry upstairs. "Hi, I'm Maxine. I am your neighbor in 315. I introduced myself and was relieved to have found a friendly face for a change. "Hey there, I'm Greg. Nice to meet you." I held out my hand and she looked uncomfortable briefly and declined the handshake. "Sorry, I'm getting over a cold I shouldn't, but it is nice to meet you," she said with another disarming smile. I was relieved to see someone who didn't look like they were minutes away from killing me or someone else, though the paranoid part of my brain was begging the question why such a seemingly nice person was stuck here. I considered asking her, but figured it would be rude to pry about her situation. She might have been like me and just on hard times. I was embarrassed when I realized I was just standing there after saying hello and stumbled for words, but she spoke first. "Well, it was nice meeting you, Greg. Stay safe and try not to let your spirits get down. It's easy in this place, but nothing bad lasts forever." She smiled and waved goodbye. I looked down to make sure the box was secure, and when I looked up to say goodbye, she was already gone. I wondered how she was so fast. Nevertheless, I felt slightly more hopeful that things might be okay after all. Another hour of moving boxes and my knees were on fire, but the meager possessions I had were finally stuffed haphazardly into the tiny apartment. I was dead tired, but it was only 4 p.m. I figured I had earned a nap though and went into the tiny closet that was supposedly a bedroom. No furniture fit besides my old mattress that took up the entirety of the space. I laid down and started drifting off. The peaceful sound of rain started to get heavier, and then I heard a new sound which woke me from my doze. A tiny dripping sound coming from the main room. I remembered what Mr. Jacobs had said about heavy rain and a leak, and I got up quickly to make sure the water was not landing on all my boxes and getting everything wet. I looked up in the corner of the room, and sure enough there was a steady dripping onto one of the boxes below. I poked around and found the dish box and took out a few pieces of Tupperware and a bowl and set one underneath the leak. I thought for a moment about calling Mr. Jacobs, but then remembered how he had given up on fixing this leak and realized it would do no good. I turned around to go back to bed when I heard an odd tearing sound like wallpaper being stretched to breaking point. When I turned around, there was nothing there. I figured it was just my nerves, and I went back to bed. I slept for about 2 hours, and despite the brief rest, I had a vivid nightmare of drowning in a dark lake with no shores on any side. It was horrible, just sinking into a black watery abyss. I was embarrassed as I woke up with a scream, but relaxed as I realized it was just a dream. and no one likely heard or cared that someone in 316 was screaming anyway. I figured the rain and that damn leak had got me thinking about water, and my negative mood may have contributed to a nightmare, so I brushed it off and went about trying to organize the chaos of boxes in some logical manner for this small space. Later that night, I had a cup of ramen for dinner and turned in early. I read a bit before bed, almost as if trying to postpone sleep, for fear of sinking into that fathomless abyss again when I slept. Eventually, I started to get comfortable and thought I may fall asleep when it started again. Drip, drip, drip. The leak had resumed. It sounded faster than before, and I thought it was strange that I could hear it so vividly. I got up to see if maybe it had overflowed or something, and I was not prepared for what I saw. The ceiling where the leak was had an odd lambent light near the center, kind of like a black light. It seemed to be pulsing in time with the drops of water. There was an odd type of density in the air too, like it was too heavy and thick. It was maddeningly humid as well, despite the cold atmosphere of the room and outside. I was confused and kind of scared by the bizarre display. I just kept thinking to myself, it is only temporary. As soon as I can leave, I will. I can make it through anything short term. I took a step further into the living room and noticed a wet spot on the floor. There is no way it could be all the way over here. The bowl on the floor was not even full yet. I suspected a leak might also be over in this spot now, so I looked up and screamed out loud. There was what looked like a face pressing through the ceiling with drops of water seeping from the thing's mouth. I turned to run and tripped on the wet floor, and toppled over, bashing my head into a wall and almost losing consciousness.